Welcome to episode 3 of season 2 of On the Grind. I'm your host, William A. Neal, Communications and Government Affairs Officer for Belize Sugar Industries Limited, BSI. As you may know, On the Grind, BSI's flagship production, is a magazine-style broadcast show designed to inform, educate, and communicate with viewers the way the northern sugar industry works. The show, produced internally by the BSI Communications Department, highlights people, projects, and programs aimed at continuing the industry's transformation and evolution on the road to sustainability. If you haven't seen any of our previous episodes, then we encourage you to catch it on Belize Sugar Industries Limited, BSI's YouTube channel, where they're posted and always available. Of course, our hope remains that we will provide insight into the northern sugar industry, demonstrate the way things work from farm to the factory and everything in between as we work on transforming the industry to face with excellence the challenges, especially those born from climate change. As a matter of fact, that's our focal point in this episode, since there's no denying that the biggest challenge for the northern sugar industry is climate change. Globally, truth be told, the agricultural sector is extremely vulnerable to climate change through the direct effects of changing climate conditions, for example, changes in temperature and/or precipitation, as well as through the indirect effects arising from changes in the severity of pests and diseases. In our industry, we continue to battle pests such as frog hoppers and stem borers and lesser-known diseases such as fusarium. Collectively, these affect agricultural productivity significantly. Climate change poses unprecedented challenges to agriculture because of the sensitivity of agricultural productivity and costs of improving growth environmental conditions. Adaptive action, therefore, offers the potential to manage the effects of climate change by altering patterns of agricultural activity to capitalize on emerging opportunities while minimizing the costs associated with negative effects. We start this episode with an in-studio interview with Daryl Audinet from the Caribbean Community Climate Change Center, or 5Cs. Audinet is the project manager for a new adaptive project largely financed by a grant from the Green Climate Fund, GCF. The project, entitled Building the Adaptive Capacity of Sugarcane Farmers in Northern Belize, or BACSUF, is at the early stages of implementation and should run through September of 2029. Audinet grew up in Southern Belize on a cacao farm before working in project management for close to a decade and a half with the Protected Areas Conservation Trust, PACT. During his PACT tenure, he supported conservation efforts with protected areas management in terms of implementing donor-funded projects, which built a solid foundation for what he currently does regionally with the 5Cs. In this conversation, Audinet discusses the ways the new project will positively impact Belize's northern sugar industry. Here's Daryl.
Professionally, I was really more involved in terms of conservation. That's where I got my professional start in conservation and with the Protected Areas Conservation Trust. I was there for about 14 years, essentially supporting the conservation field, protected areas management, in terms of projects, donors, implementing donor-funded projects, and so that's where I got my project management background in. In terms of 5Cs, I've been involved with projects, and for me, 5Cs was sort of a natural progression for me from the Belize focus to more the regional scale. So 5Cs in terms of its scope is regional. It's in terms of the Caribbean, the entire Caribbean basin, all CARICOM countries. And so I've been a bit fortunate in terms of understanding and working with countries in implementation of projects um, in terms of climate change and climate related projects. So projects that really look at tackling issues of climate change, water scarcity issues, and so I've been involved with those type of projects for about 4.5 years now, all the way from Guyana to Bahamas, right, and a few countries in between. But for me, I am happy to be able to see the effort of my work as a project manager in my country, and so this particular project is one that I'm quite proud of and happy to be a part of, because I know it's not only going to contribute to my professional growth but also my country. The very sugar that I drink my coffee, I'm going to have a hand in ensuring that that is something that is sustainable for the future.
Now, when you talk about um, the work that 5Cs does, can you perhaps elaborate a little bit on the significance of that organization as a regional body, um, and how, given the fact that we represent countries that are heavily impacted by climate change itself?
Right. So the 5Cs is an organ of the CARICOM, or the Caribbean Community, and it has a mandate of addressing or leading the region's response to climate change. So that is the task that the Caribbean Community had provided to the center back in 2005. And so since then, the center has really been the driving force in terms of what the region does in terms of climate change, from simple things as how we address policy level, how we discuss and negotiate at the international level when it comes to these COPs, Conference of the Parties, and to the level of actual interventions in countries. So the 5Cs is accredited to various entities, the Green Climate Fund being one of our major donors, and this particular project is funded by the Green Climate Fund. And so essentially, we provide that avenue where countries can access these international resources, and then we with our expertise in project management, project development, and management, we implement these. This particular in terms of the 5Cs, the breadth of projects is wide, from this one that is agriculture based to policy level when you're looking at climate change, how we're looking at gender as it relates to climate and development, water resources, how we manage water resources, even to the extent of climate change and health. So the scope of our work is quite broad, but it's still centralized and focused on climate change and the impacts that it has on our member states.
Now, when you're looking at a regional body and you're thinking, how do you impact um, the entire region? When you have a project that is, being piloted of sorts within a particular country, how do you ensure that while the nationals from that country understand the project, that CARICOM regional residents also understand that this is something that you're working towards developing best practices that can then be rolled out in other territories across the region?
Right. No, that's a important thing for us, because we've been implementing projects in various countries, and it's always important to not only think about the needs of that country or addressing the particular needs, but how is it that this could also contribute to other countries and their own development. It's surprising to know that while we're so diverse in our different cultures and countries, we're so alike in many ways. And so what could work in a country could easily be replicated. And so when we're developing our projects and implementing it, we're always thinking about how is it that it's done here, and how is it that it could be done elsewhere. Maybe there might be some tweaks in terms of procedure and process, but it's always there's always a possibility of replication. And in fact, we're currently implementing projects in Barbados in terms of water resource management. And right now, we're working with the government of Belize in terms of replicating some of those investments. So, similarly, I'm sure that we will have at some point a replication of this agriculture project in one of the other CARICOM member states.
Does that increase the pressure?
It certainly does. It certainly does. Right now, that's a pressure that is going to come, but the pressure really now is to ensure that our cane farmers are seeing the benefits, and Belize is seeing the benefits. So I think that's more of a present pressure now. At 5Cs, we have two levels of technical capacity in terms of projects. So my colleagues that are more in terms of project development, they would be looking at that focus. What is the pressure on other countries, other member states, in seeing how we could replicate this, right? But also from our end as project managers, that's a type of pressure that we will see, as we go into implementation. I must say that in this particular project, the pressure is not only regional, it's also international, because this box of short for the project is the first of its kind funded by GCF as it relates to building climate resilience in sugarcane industries. And so there's a lot of countries quite interested to see how this project pans out.
Now, coming on as a project manager for a situation like this, where you have to bring stakeholders to the table to actually and guide them, but at the same time ensure that there's full inclusion. How do you manage such a process, and how does the center actually ensure that there is that inclusiveness from the inception to the implementation?
Well, I may be the face as the project manager, but there's an entire team involved in these projects, all the way from administrative support to gender and inclusivity support, experts from the office that are involved in environmental and social risk. We have more agriculture based experts. And so, again, we pool our resources together to ensure that we're capturing every aspect that could have an implication on these projects. And of course, notwithstanding that, we know that other stakeholders have expertise. They have thoughts, opinions, ideas in terms of how we can implement our projects. So while we're in a driving seat in terms of being the implementing entity, it's not a 5Cs alone project. We're just there to ensure that it's a project that is implemented in accordance with what was approved by the donor. But it's really a project for everyone.
Now, let me just go back a little while we're having this, because climate change is still something that is kind of nebulous. People are not sure what it means. You hear it as one of the, buzzwords everywhere you turn. It's almost like transparency and accountability and sustainability and so many other things. What would you say to the average Belizean? Why are we so focused that we, even as a region, develop on a climate change center to actually focus our efforts and to look at mitigation?
Well, climate change is a funny thing, and it's funny because it's ever so present but yet so distant. We think of climate change as something that will happen 50 years from now. It's kind of like seeing your kids growing up. You see them every day and you don't see the small changes, the small adjustments, or us not exercising and we're not seeing the belly getting a bit bigger, right? It happens over a course of it happens over the course of time. And that's what makes climate change a bit difficult to understand, because day to day we do not necessarily see the changes. Mind you, these days we're seeing the changes every single day. So the thing with climate change is that it manifests itself in various ways to different people depending on the situation, right? So um, it's that also lends to the difficulty of defining what it is. But it is important. It is important to understand how is it that the changes in the climate patterns affect our daily lives, and that is what the center is really there for, to be a voice to the need for us to address and adapt to that change.
Now, following on what you're saying, because I like the fact that you're talking about it, it seems far, but yet it's happening presently. Um, are there concerns, for example, about food security as a result? Because I know in the north, we've seen rains from October, you know, how that impacts crops. And it's not just sugar cane, it's other crops as well. So let's talk a little bit about that, just to break it down, that, you know, John and Jane Public does not look at it only from, oh, I'm not a cane farmer, so I should not be interested. Or I'm not in the agricultural sector, I should not be interested.
Yeah, and I think the sugarcane industry is a good example of it, because it touches the lives of every single Belizean. You know, the person with the shop on the side of the street that's selling pastries, where will they get their sugar from? You know, the person these kids at school without their ideal, sweeten the ideal, how are they not going to be getting that treat that they need? So the important thing is to understand how is it that is affecting the individual circumstance. With the agriculture sector, we know that the economy is very dependent on the availability of products, supply and demand, very basic economics. Climate change has a direct impact in terms of that. Um, I joke to some of my friends that, because you know, coming to Orange Rock, you need to get your tacos, right? But a couple times I went to one of the stores and it says no orange. So no orange in Orange Rock, right? But why is that the case? We've seen the orange, the citrus industry affected by multiple things: pests, climate issues in terms of droughts. Of course, there are the issues of the anthropogenic, which is the man-made issues. But all of that does affect how we see these industries. So, I mean, if you take example of the orange industry, the citrus industry, it is a clear example of how, if we're not acting appropriately, not only for now, but what are going to be the needs and demands for next year, the year after. So it has to be something that we look at.
Now, let's move away from John and Jane Public and talk to a cane farmer. Why should he or she be interested in this particular project?
So this particular project is doing several things. First and foremost, it is looking at the actual cane itself. Right now, we know that there is basically one type of variety that is the majority of the industry. What happens when you put all your eggs in one basket? We know what happens. So the idea of this project is, let's move away from one type of cane variety. Let's look at others. What's the potential? There may be some challenges along the way, but there may also be very good benefits along the way in doing so. The idea that we've done the research, we've done the studies to see that these varieties are viable. And the idea is that we're moving away from just one. We're filling our basket with other things. The second thing, this industry requires us to think outside of the box. That outside of the box requires us to look at technology, to look at different systems of how we're operating, something as simple as accessibility to water, right? Let's do something differently. Let's try something differently. That this project provides us that opportunity to do that. Because 50 years from now, not even 50, 5 years from now, we want our sugarcane industry to still be a viable industry. many lives count on it.
So, what would you say to a cane farmer now to get involved in terms of a call to actually be a participant as opposed to a spectator?
So the first thing is that, okay, let's have that discussion. Let's clearly understand what the project is and is not. Right? The important thing is that we're not over exceeding expectations. There's clear understanding in terms of what the project will and will not do. But the first thing is, let's have that conversation. And at 5Cs, that's one of the first things that we want to do is to have that conversation with the cane farmers. Let them know and understand what this project means, what it means, and to also hear from them what it means for them, what it means to move away from the B79, what it means to move away from all of what has been traditionally the case for the industry.
Now, we're at the very beginning of the implementation. Of course, this project started some time ago. So, this is when the work really begins. What's your expectations as you move into this portion of the project itself, its implementation?
So my expectation and that really of the 5Cs is that we collaborate effectively. All right, we collaborate effectively to ensure that this project meets its expectation. As I said earlier, there's a lot of people banking on the success of this project. There's a lot of entities banking, and frankly, there are a lot of countries banking on the success of this project. But we should not necessarily do it for them. We should do it for ourselves. What I expect, as I said, is that there's a continuous collaboration. There's a influx of new ideas, new ways of thinking. Because at the end of the day, the project was written by people just like you and I. They had ideas of what could be the potential of this project, but case in point, Fusarium was not something that was planned for under this project, in the sense of, we won't say, okay, well, next year we'll have a pest outbreak, so we should plan for it. But we should continue to maintain that level of collaboration to ensure that when these challenges arise, we address them collectively.
Yeah. Before I end, I want to revisit the name because it's a very long name, right? Building the adaptive capacity of sugarcane farmers in Northern Belize. And people may not understand how much of a repair the plane while flying the plane kind of attitude you must employ, that there's not no exact science, but you are using science at the same time.
Right.
So what would you say is encapsulated in the name itself?
Well, the name tried to emphasize everything that the project is. It's for Northern Belize, obviously. Important part in that entire name is cane farmers, sugarcane farmers. This project is for the benefit of sugarcane farmers, right? And it is talking about adaptive capacity. The adaptive capacity meaning not necessarily in terms of intellectual capacity, but also the ability, the tools, the systems, the technology that would allow for sugarcane farmers, and by extension the industry, to build its own capacity to adapt effectively to the potential impacts, or current and potential future impacts of climate change on the industry. So it's trying to be at the foresight of what could potentially be. So that's all of that is in that name.
Now, the final question for me is, well, there are two. One, there's a emphasis on the ability to pivot, right? But we have industry that you have aging farmers, for example. You have 50 plus, so technology, as you alluded to, is something that they have to be open to. But when you have that kind of a dynamic where it's culturally woven into the socio-economic fabric of everything that is in the North, how do you get people to start thinking outside the box, when, I've been doing this, I'm 50, I've been doing this for 40 years or more, how do you get people to actually start revisiting what they're doing?
One thing that I've learned in my years in climate change and even conservation is that you can't really tell people about the climate is changing, about this, about that. Have them understand what it means to their pockets. What does it mean for me not to adapt to the realities of climate change? How is that going to affect my cane fields? How is that going to affect my family's ability to provide for my family, to send my children to school? How is that going to be affected? That I think will bring people to the table, and that's where I feel it's important for us to have that conversation from the very onset, and continue that conversation to ensure that farmers maintain to be a part of this project.
So the final question now, indeed, is as you move into this phase, what would you say is perhaps your biggest hope, your greatest hope for this project at its conclusion in 5 years' time, if you can look down the road?
Yeah, my biggest hope aspiration for this project is that we've actually completed what the name is talking about. We're building the adaptive capacity that sugarcane farmers are able to say, you know what, my farm is in a better place. I am more prepared for the issues of climate change now and potentially the changes that may come. And so, once we're able to do that, I think we're contented. 5Cs will be contented that we've changed the lives of our farmers.
In our chat, Daryl spoke in general terms about the BACSUF project. The project has three major components. Component 1, climate risk reduction and increased adaptive capacity through improved crop diversity of farmers. It has a GCF grant of $14.46 million US, mainly for seed cane nurseries, replanting and sustainable agriculture practices, mechanical green harvesting and improved soil health, compost and other soil health projects. Component 2, sustainable water and land management techniques for increased productivity and consistent supply chain. That has a GCF grant of $4.807 million US, mainly for drainage, irrigation, and integrated pest and residue management. Component 3, knowledge and knowledge systems to proactively early warning, investing, build resilience to climate impact, while at the same time transforming farming systems for long-term adaptation. It has a GCF grant of $4.056 million US, mainly for transformation training, capacity building systems, scale up of blockchain platform, and information sharing and communication. From the potential industry-wide benefits of the new project to the work at Belize Sugar Industries Research Department that is critical in the climate change adaptive actions being taken. Often overlooked, the BSI Research Department is more than 5 decades old and is now led by Adrian Zetina, whose father also held the same position. Today, the lead position has broadened under the new title of Sustainable Agriculture Lead. Adrian's professional foray into the northern sugar industry began through the Sugar Industry Research and Development Institute, SIRDI. He clearly recounts the collaboration with BSI back then. Adrian says, looking for answers through meticulous scientific investigation fuels his passion for research. Here's Adrian on the scientific method and the development of new varieties.
One of my first memories with engaging with BSI was when I started working in the sugar industry, which was about 10 years ago. And you're making me feel old now, William. But I remember when I started, and this was the place to go to learn. When I first started with sugarcane varieties, I was working with it, and then I started collaborating with BSI. And the people here were whom you came to learn from. How do you do it? How do you set up all of these experiments? And so it was this place of knowledge that I had and that I've now held, for the past 10 years.
What created an interest for you in terms of research? Because most people don't gravitate towards research. Why is that a passion for you?
There's two things that I like about it. The first is finding out the unknown, what works, what doesn't work. And there's many times that things don't work. But that's okay, because then we can then disseminate that to the farm and also to the farmers, right, the independent growers, telling them, we tried it and it didn't work. So that's the part that I like. The other that maybe not everyone also would share this passion with me is the data analysis of it, going through the numbers and doing data mining, finding these trends that everyone might not see, seeing what the numbers can tell us beyond just looking at an average or looking at a single number, because there are many things from that data set that we can learn from.
Now, I know in terms of research, let's talk about the weather component. How critical is weather to your work?
It's the single most driving factor that we have. It is, the planting is based off of the weather. The sampling is based off of the weather. We are always planning around the weather and not the weather planning around us. So, it's immensely important, not only for research, but also for the industry as a whole, because we're 99% rain fed. So if it doesn't rain, it affects everyone. If it does rain excessively, it affects everyone.
Development of a new variety, because that's one of the things that we've managed to do, BSI has managed to do recently. Let's talk a little bit about the varieties that were developed, and in a very simplistic kind of a way, how long does it actually take to develop a variety?
That's a question that I get asked often, and it's a difficult question to answer. Of the varieties that were released in October of last year, some have been in the pipeline for 20 years, 21 now, and some have been in the pipeline for 13 years, the younger varieties, we'll call it. But at a minimum, it's going to take 12 years of research to identify a single variety.
So what do you do in that process? And I know it's based on a scientific method, so let's go through that as simplistically as possible.
Okay, so we start off with about 35,000 individual varieties, and it's our job to sift through this haystack to find the needle. And what we're doing is we're testing for two main drivers, which is productivity. That's what everyone wants from a variety. They want higher productivity. And we also want very sweet cane. And what we do at every step in the process is we compare it against our benchmark. So our benchmark here is the Queen of the North, B79. And anything that's better than that, when we test it every year, if it surpasses B79, then it moves on to the next step. Then we also go applying filters such as disease tolerance or disease resistance. If a variety does show any susceptibility to disease, such as
so do you infect the variety?
Right now, we rely on natural inoculation, and you'll see it in the field that some varieties will develop disease symptoms, And so when we get there, then we know that the entire field has had that pressure. You can see sometimes they're side by side. One does have disease such as smut, and right beside it, the variety does not have. And so you can then say, okay, well, this variety is disease resistant. The other thing that we also look at is the ratooning, which is very important for us, particularly for the Belizean sugar farmer, is we like to ratoon very long. So your plant cane cycle, the plant cane is always wonderful. The cane field always looks very healthy, but you really want to know what's going to happen in the first ratoon, second ratoon, and third ratoon. That's when the varieties really begin to distinguish themselves.
And for someone who's not from the industry and south of Orange Walk, what is a ratoon?
Good question, William. Good question. A ratoon is cane. Well, cane is a grass. So it's very, very similar to when we're mowing our lawn and the grass comes back.
Or weed whack it, right?
You're weed whacking or with a machete, right? That same plant that you cut last week begins to regrow and have these new leaves. Now, cane is similar. It is a grass. So when you cut the cane, you're harvesting it to take it to the mill. That same plant will regrow, and that's what we call a ratoon.
So you were explaining about the ratooning process?
Correct. Planting is very expensive, and we rely on having that cane field in production as long as possible so you can get the most out of your investment that you've made in that field. So the longer you can ratoon, then the better it is. Not every variety ratoons well. Not every variety can continuously regrow year after year after year. There's some that have better ratooning abilities and some that have poor ratooning abilities. And we look for the ones that have good ratooning abilities. Now, that's not to say that you're going to have a variety that's going to last you for forever. At some point, as with anything, with your car, with anything, you do need to change it because it's just gotten too old, too beat up. You do need to start again at some point.
Now, introducing a variety, how do you get farmers to actually try it as well? Because I know there's one thing when you have it under your research methodology. What are the factors that, when you partner with farmers, what are the factors that you're looking at in that case?
Okay, so when we've taken it out to, when we're at that stage of rolling it out to farmers, it's gone through the entire filtration system the past 12 years, right? And it's been consistently showing good results up until on that time. So we're fairly confident that when we take it out to farmers that we're going to have good results. And I usually liken it to picking a cereal in the grocery store, right? All of them are good. Some people will like sweeter ones. Some people will like the All brand. It's more a preference to what you will like. And, these varieties, it's a bit more technical than that, but that's an oversimplification of it. Now, how we get farmers to test it out is we say, well, try it. That's it. You're trying a new cereal. Try it. If you don't like it, then you're not going to buy it again. So that's the way that we look at it. And to try it means plant a small plot. The industry term is mecate, which is 1/8 of an acre. Plant one mecate, and then right beside it, plant your variety of choice, which is in most cases B79. And you watch them grow side by side. Same management, same weather conditions. It's exactly the same. And then we'll see which one performs better. So it's just a matter of trying it.
Why has it been so hard to replace or find an alternative to the B79?
It is has adapted remarkably well to the current Belizean condition. Current is the key word there because the conditions are always changing. So as we go, we're facing climate change, and as weather events become more extreme, as temperatures begin to rise, there's going to be a change in the condition. It just so happens right now that B79 has adapted very well to the conditions that we have, the rainfall regime and the soil types that we have. So that's why it's been very difficult to displace B79. And it's not that anything is wrong with it, right? There's nothing wrong. I mean, obviously there's nothing wrong with it if it's covering 55% of the industry. It's just that we have too much of it. And that over-reliance can be a dangerous thing. If a disease is to enter the industry and B79 is particularly susceptible to that disease, then we have more than half of our industry in peril.
Now, one of the other things that I wanted you to explain was the name itself, B79. What does that stand for, the nomenclature of that?
Yeah, right. Why do we pick such complicated names? B79 474, B52 298. It's not for us to sound smart or anything. It's there is a structure to it. So if we break it up, and that's the way that we need to see it, there's three components in the name. Let's start off first with the letter B. B means it came from Barbados. That's where the cross was done, and that is where the selection process was done. So we actually have a foreigner here that covers most of the industry. The second part, B79, 474, the second part is 79. That means that it was crossed in 1979. So it's a very long time ago. It's more than 30 years ago that that variety has started its genesis. And then we have the last part, which is 474. Now, what does that 474 mean? I had said earlier that we start off with about 35,000 varieties every year. So as you go naming the varieties in that year, you go naming B79001. You start off with 1, then 2, 3, 4, and so on. And it just so happened that number 474 of that year was the winner. That's the one that hit the lottery. Hence, you have B79474. Now, varieties that are evaluated in Belize, we add on a BZ. So we have a BZ, meaning that the cross was made in Barbados, and then the evaluation is done in Belize. So we have a BBZ 8257, and then the numbers then follow the same methodology there. But we do have our BBZ program, which is getting crosses, the initial genetic material from Barbados, with the evaluation done here under local conditions.
Now, besides the technicality of the name, a lot of people say cane na cane. You know, there's no difference. Is that necessarily true?
There is a lot of difference that in coloration, in productivity, in quality. Cane is as unique as human beings. Every person has their own likes and dislikes. Some people are tall, some people are short, some people are skinny, some people are stout. The cane is the same thing. Each of them have their own unique characteristics.
So, given the challenges of climate change, what are we looking for currently in terms of trying to create something that will move into the future?
As we move forward, these weather events become more extreme. The swings are from one to the next. And the one that I like to bring up is the drought that we had in 2019, which was, we received 35% less rainfall than usual. And then the following year, that 2019 was the driest on record, then the following year, we swung in the opposite direction where we had the wettest year on record. I mean, there's no variety that can prepare us for that, but we do need to have varieties that can give us a fighting chance. So varieties that are drought tolerant, that have shown some level of drought tolerance. You're never going to find any plant that cannot grow without water, but some are deeper rooting and then therefore can withstand drought more. Varieties that can also withstand waterlogging, going into when it rains a lot in these lower lying areas in the industry, such as maybe San Roman, Douglas area, that no matter what they do, they're going to have some waterlogging. So varieties that can adapt to that. With these extreme weather events, you also have pest outbreaks. So we also need varieties that are resistant to pests as well too. I had said earlier that weather is the driving factor for us, and that dictates everything that happens out in the field. So we want varieties then that can adapt as best as possible to a wide array of scenarios that can present itself.
One of the final questions, what would you say right now is the focus of your research? What is the thing that perhaps gets you up each day to look at, to say, I'm preparing this for the industry at this juncture?
There's a lot of exciting things that are happening right now. Well, with varieties, it's always exciting because you can have such a profound impact on the industry for the next 20 or 30 years. Look at B79. We've been growing that in Belize for the past 20 plus years. And that has been the livelihood of farmers since some can remember. So that's one of the things that is very impactful. The other is the sustainable agriculture and looking at making our farming operation more sustainable in every way. In every way, with sustainability, there's 3 P's. There's people, planet, profit. And it's about finding a way that you can make all 3 of these elements happy. And that's no easy feat. It does mean changing our husbandry practices that we have. But the impact, again, that we can have can be profound if we can implement the types of practices that we need to have in the field, can then actually reverse climate change if we're sequestering enough carbon. So that's another of the areas that is one of the reasons why I wake up and enjoy coming to work.
What would you say to farmers in particular, why the work that you do is important? Because for a lot of people, research is something that people say, oh yeah, they're doing research, but they don't see it as something that is tangible. Obviously, with the development of the different varieties and the introduction, that is one way. But what would you say, why is there a need for research and for it to be continuous?
Well, it's multifaceted, right? So we usually discuss about varieties a lot because it's very interesting. But there's other research that's happening in pest management, in weed management, in nutrition.
Weed or wheat?
Weed.
Oh,
weed
wow.
Management. Pest management. So there's other areas that span the entire cane cultivation cycle. And what we're always trying to do is we're trying to make something better. Last year we had a field day with farmers and we invited about 30 of them and we just said, well, this is what we've been doing for the past year. This is the research results of it. And we showed them some of the results that we had with nutrition in terms of composting. We showed them some of the results that we had trialing a new product for weed management to control nut grass. We showed them some of the results for plant growth regulators, what are the gains that you get with that. We also showed them also some of the varieties that we have under evaluation. And they thoroughly enjoyed their day. They were asking questions, and some of them then can adopt some of this. You know, we've, again, saying that we've trialed that, right? We've trialed a product, we've trialed this for control of nut grass. It does work at this dosage. So if you have this problem, you know, you can use this. So it's like, it's getting what we have developed out to the farmers so that they can then grow cane. They can improve their practices that they have in their farm.
BSI is the largest employer in the North, with more than 500 people powering our operations. And if you add in all the temps and casuals, that number moves closer to 700. In our ongoing segment entitled People Power and Empowered, we continue to highlight the diversity, job, gender, and age, among other things, of our workforce. See if you spot any familiar faces from friends to family. You never know. With that, we've come to the end of another episode of On the Grind. Once again, we hope that it has been the right amount of edutainment, education and entertainment on the Northern sugar industry. Please continue to like, share and comment as we shine a light on our Northern sugar industry. We leave you once again with our theme song consisting of factory sounds, harvested and arranged by Tillett and Chandler White, to capture the industrial symphony that is Tower Hill. Listen carefully, and when the siren sounds, know that we're only changing shifts because we stay on the grind 24/7 on the clock. Until next time, I am your host, William A. Neal. Thank you for tuning in.